Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Today, Rich and I are going to discuss Lamar Jackson, the Bears running game, and preview the most interesting games of Week 14. So make sure you stick around. Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. My name's Ray. Rich is over there on the other side. We're going to get you ready for Week 14 of the fantasy football season. Before we do that, I wanted to tell you about a great offer that we're running this week. We're obviously in crunch time of the fantasy season. This is the last week of the fantasy season for most places. Some people are already into the playoffs. For most places, this is the last week. So we have a great deal for you to get you ready for this last week of the fantasy regular season, to get you ready for the fantasy playoffs. We're giving you complete access to the fantasy football content this week for just $1. That means you get access to all of Rich's content, his game-by-game, player-by-player previews. We call them the worksheet. It's the best way to get ready for a week of fantasy football. Those are all available to you. You can have access to his fantasy football rankings, his DFS picks, his Sunday morning subscriber-only chat, which is great. As I read this week, got us onto Devon Vele last week, so that was good. So make sure you
shout out the chat.
Good work, chat. And so there's lots of stuff available to all of our subscribers. And again, you can get on this week, just this week only, for just $1 using promo code week14. Make sure you head over to sharp.football. There are instructions there. You can just click on the button and you'll get to where you need to go. All right, let's get to it. Let's talk about some of these week 14 games that Rich has already previewed over on the website. And I feel like, we didn't talk last week because last week, Thursday, was Thanksgiving. But it was more of the same last week, and that all offense is bad, and that there is no bottom, and that's what we continue. That's what we continue to find this football season.
Yeah, unfortunately, eventually there's got to be like a dead cat bounce, right? Are we allowed to say dead cat bounce still? Like, I don't know. These phrases are like that were just around
I genuinely
forever.
don't know where that phrase comes from. Like, that's one where I have no idea. Like, I can kind of understand some phrases. Who's bouncing cats? I'm really confused by this whole thing. But,
yeah. I always think about you and I always have these conversations with like one of these old phrases come up, and it's like, wait, are we still allowed to say that?Here does that originate from? Is that something we've got to go back and look and say like, oh no, man.
That's not a good one. There's a lot that we've removed from our vocabularies. I'll say that we have a complicated history in this country. You might know.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do those intros every week, just kind of like you always call them like the State of the Union, and the last month it just somehow keeps getting worse. And last week was the lowest scoring fantasy week of the season, as I'm sure a lot of gamers found out. But the offenses continue to struggle. We now have the fewest passing yards per team through this point of a season since 2006. Not 1 week in the month of November did NFL offenses average two points per drive. That happened 8 of the opening 9 weeks. It's gone south, man, in a hurry. Running backs are still doing good. If you got that, that's really it though. But I continue to wonder if it's going to bounce back or if we get like a boom for the playoffs. But eventually, we have to have at least another good week this season.
And this week is interesting because we do have a lot of good games. In fact, we're going to go through a few of them, but there are also like some toilet bowls that you're like, I have no interest in this game, like Titans Browns.
Well, I always judge the slate based on how I feel about the quarterback play, because usually if the quarterback's playing well, it's going to drive the ship, right? And this year it's not, or this week it's not a great quarterback week, and it's really hard because I feel like we've got a lot of good quarterbacks in bad spots and not a lot of good streamers. And I'm sure like you hinted at when we talk about Lamar Jackson, it's like some of these guys, I don't even know like who you could bench them for when you want to bench them. And we'll talk about some of those, but it's like, I usually go by how I feel about the quarterback play. And this week I'm very questionable. And even in doing the rankings, I just don't feel like the rankings are an accurate representation this week of how I feel about the slate either. Because you have to put guys on a list, which is always, I have issues with anyways, but I mean, like guys like Jalen Hurts is in a terrible spot. Mahomes could be missing 3 offensive linemen against the best pass rush in the NFL. What are gamers doing with Lamar? Jared Goff's at home, but they don't have Laporte, or they probably won't have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, there's all this volatility this week.
Yeah, and you even look at some of the, like you would say, quote unquote, good spots. Like you would say Baker is probably in a good spot this week, but he's also hurt. And are they going
Baker's going to have 6 surgeries when the season ends. Like we're going to get like,
and is he going to get pushed, right? Like, is he going to get pushed on the other side? If you are the Bucks, given everything that's going on with Baker, you're going to want to hide him as much as possible, right? Are you going to run? Is he going to run as much, which has been a key to his value since he just hasn't been playing as well? Because again, he's hurt. We're not criticizing Baker. He's hurt. It is what it is. Like Bo Nix, you might try to chase Bo Nix against the Raiders, but we've seen this play before for Bo Nix. Matthew Stafford, it's a good matchup against the Cardinals, but I mean, you have questions about that as well. So like there are all these spots that you even are like, all right, I want to be excited about this, but I can't be excited about this. And so, like you said, I ended up with Tyrod Taylor as my number one streaming option against the Dolphins. I don't feel great about that, but like, who else am I putting in there? Trevor Lawrence. Can he keep getting away with this? I guess is the question. We'll talk about that game. Tyler Shuck. Like Tyler Shuck might make an appearance in Uncut Gems. That's where we are when we're talking about streamers here. So it's an interesting and tough week if you have been riding the streaming train with quarterbacks, and we'll have to see. That also could just mean though that like the bar to clear to have a useful week is just low, and if that's the case, then it doesn't matter as much.
And I've been putting a lot of that. I don't know if you caught it, like when I do the worksheet and I'm doing like, because we do like the arbitrary stuff where you talk about like QB1 performances, and I've been like acknowledging like, hey, this dude was a QB1, but it was like obviously like it's because like it was a low scoring week again. Like this is why he got there. And then when you aren't a QB1 in those weeks, it stands out even more. You're like, yeah, this guy was certifiably bad.
Speaking of, we'll get to Lamar Jackson in a second. We want the old Lamar back. Before we do that, though, before we get into our agree and disagree segments, before we get into our game previews, I do want to bring in Warren Sharp. He's going to talk about our PrizePicks lineup for Week 14.
It's time for us to build this week's PrizePicks lineup and turn $100 into $600. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports with their easy-to-use app. And now you can play $5 and get $50 instantly in lineups when you use code Warren after you download their app. All right, we are back with another PrizePicks lineup for you this week. As a reminder, PrizePicks is available in over 40 states, including California and Texas. So if you want to get involved, that's a place to do it in some of those states where you may not be able to get down other ways, but you definitely can get down through PrizePicks, and use the link in the description below, and you can get $50 in lineups instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Let's get started with our first selection for the lineup, and we're going Chase Brown, more than 13.5 for his longest run. Now, as you can see, he's hit this in 3 out of the last 4 games. Actually, if you go back before that, he's hit it in 4 out of the last 5 games. 3 out of the last 4 is correct as well, but 4 out of the last 5 as well. In fact, it's actually 5 out of the last 6 games he's topped this, which you might not think because you're thinking the Bengals, they passed the ball, Joe Burrow's back, but we actually have some upside here with Chase Brown, and he's doing it against the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are a team that if you look at the 16 running backs that have had 8+ rushing attempts against the Buffalo Bills, 12 of them have runs of 13+ yards. 12 of the 16, all of them, except for one, has a rush of 12+ yards. So obviously we need him to get 14, but we're talking about the ballpark that we're in here. Running backs tend to have an explosive. Chase Brown still is, although Samaje Perine is back, Chase Brown still is the go-to guy for the rushing attack of the Cincinnati Bengals. We're looking more than 13.5. Next up, we've got Chris Rodriguez of the Washington Commanders, more than 38.5 rushing yards. And I think the key here with this one is look at that picture on your screen, and you can see the defenses that he has gone up against recently. Think about their run defenses, the last 5 games that he's played. The Kansas City Chiefs run defense, the Seattle Seahawks run defense, the Detroit Lions run defense, the Miami Dolphins run defense, and the Denver Broncos run defense. Those are some elite and outstanding run defenses for the most part. Miami Dolphins have become a better run defense than you remember from the beginning of the season. And still, he has exceeded this number in 3 out of the last 4 games. Running backs going up against the Minnesota Vikings tend to have more rushing attempts because the Minnesota Vikings aren't an offense that jumps out to big leads early in games and builds these leads to force other teams to have to throw the football in the second half of games. A lot of running backs can run the football in the second half of games because those games are close against the Minnesota Vikings, which should provide additional rushing opportunity for Chris Rodriguez here, who is clearly the best running back in terms of his efficiency and production on the ground for the Commanders of late and has been getting a little bit more of the workload. So more than 38.5 rushing yards for Rodriguez. Rounding out our shot to turn $100 into $600 is Blake Corum. And we're going longest rush, more than 11.5 for Corum. Now, bottom line with Corum is we've ridden him on his longest rush previously, but that's been at a more reasonable 9.5. 11.5 is about the peak of what you might be willing to take, at least for me, on Blake Corum. Now, you can still see that he's topped it in 3 of the last 5 games, and the 2 that he didn't top it against was against Seattle and Tampa Bay. Both teams have great run defenses. The thing about this game against the Arizona Cardinals is that during the Cardinals' last 4 games, they have faced 36, 28, 26, and 26 backfield touches. Opposing running backs get a lot of opportunity to get carries and sometimes receptions against them because the Cardinals aren't jumping out to big leads themselves. Opposing running backs are constantly being utilized and constantly having success against the Arizona Cardinals run defense. And as a result, there's opportunities here for Blake Corum. And when you look at Blake Corum, he has gone over this number, except against, if we go back even further beyond the Saints game, we'll see that he played the Jaguars, a very good run defense. He fell short. And the prior 2 games was against the Ravens and against the 49ers. He went over his longest rush in both of those games as well. So it sets up for a situation where he is getting a little bit more of the early game work, splitting with Kyren Williams a touch more. They're using now Kyren a little bit more to round out and close out games in the fourth quarter, whereas the season started with Blake Corum mostly getting touches if the Rams were up big late. Now they're trying to get Blake Corum the football a little bit more earlier on in games because of his explosive ability. We saw that on full display last week against the Carolina Panthers, where he had a long run of 34 yards. So we're looking more than 11.5 longest rush for Corum. So that'll wrap things up for our PrizePicks lineup this week. We're going with Chase Brown, more than 13.5 longest rush, Blake Corum, more than 11.5 longest rush, and Chris Rodriguez, more than 38.5 rushing yards. Good luck with everything. If you want to get on board with PrizePicks, make sure you use the link below and you can get $50 in lineups when you enter your first $5 lineup.
All right, let's get going with my favorite game. Some are saying the best podcast gimmick that they've ever seen, and that is Agree or Disagree, where I force Rich to agree or disagree with some topics. We've kind of already hit on the first one here, and I think I therefore know what the answer is to this question, but it is a good jumping off point to talk about Lamar Jackson, and that is, the statement is, it is time to start streaming for Lamar Jackson.
I agree. I think we're going to have to talk about some names when we get there, but I mean, this is a real tough spot though for gamers, especially the week. Like if this was week 7, I think like a lot of people would have no issues, be like just shadow banning him and saying, hey, show me something, Lamar. But with this being kind of week 14, you might need a win. Although I do think a lot of people that probably invested the capital into Lamar Jackson probably are not that great, but it's a wide open year this year. There's a lot, I know in a lot of leagues I'm in, it's like these last playoff spots are just, it's a hodgepodge of teams. Like they're just in the middle of leagues. So I could see a lot of you being still alive too for a playoff spot. You might have had good streaming weeks when he was out and injured too as well. So I don't want to say that all Lamar Jackson teams are bad, but he is looking like one of the objectively worst draft picks at cost this year. But you look at kind of the injury excuse for him, and I think that there is merit to like him playing hurt stuff. We talked about a little bit Baker, but like he's been absolutely awful though too, because people are like, well, if Likely doesn't fumble at the 1 and Zay Flowers doesn't get the ticky-tack OPI, like his box score looks better, and it does. But then when you look under the hood and we just watch the game, like he's just missing throws like weekly, like just throws that you got to be able to hit. I mean, he had like a 3rd and 8 out route on like the second drive of the game. It's like, dude, like this is like a bona fide throw that like any quarterback makes. He had the highest inaccurate throw rate in week 13. You're like, all right, well, it's a one-off, right? Nope. He had the highest inaccurate throw rate in week 12. In week 11, he had the second highest inaccurate throw rate, only behind Jared Goff in that Eagles like Sunday night game. Remember that game? That was a disaster. Over the past 5 seasons, 3 of Lamar Jackson's now highest inaccurate throw rates have come the past 3 weeks. Like he's playing bad football too, on top of whether that's a byproduct injury or not. But it just goes deeper than just the him rushing stuff. And then when you remove the him not having the rushing outlet, because we've seen Lamar Jackson go through some kind of funks, not to this degree in his career, but like, hey, he's going to give me some rushing points. We're going to have a high floor. But without that rushing outlet, now you haven't had that floor. And that's how you get these single digit performances, because this isn't a team that's going to have a high drop back rate, even though they did on Thursday in some wonky game scripts. And then you talk about this matchup here, and like, you're not scared of the Steelers, but like, this is a team that's given him issues in his career, and a team that, even though they've allowed some passing touchdown production, have still been really good. They haven't allowed over 7 yards for pass attempts since week 8. And that's, facing guys like Daniel Jones, Josh Allen, Joe Flacco, Justin Herbert, Caleb Williams. Lamar has one 20-point fantasy game in his career against the Steelers. He's the highest he's ever finished in a week is QB 12 against the Steelers. So it's like all these things like line up where it's like, yeah, we would bench him. But then you're like, all right, well, I need a playoff spot. If Lamar, here's what's tricky about it is if Lamar plays bad and you put him in your lineup, you're like, oh, I'm adult. Like he had been playing bad. I deserve what I get. And then if you bench him though, and Lamar plays good, you're like, oh, it was Lamar Jackson. Why didn't I play him? So it's like, it's kind of a lose-lose proposition to a degree. So I lean towards like, if I had like even a Trevor Lawrence, a Jacoby Brissett, like Daniel Jones, like those are all guys I'm playing still over him. I think when you get into the stream, it gets a little bit of tougher because like, are you getting to Tyrod over him? I think Tyrod, the way he scores his fantasy points is in a similar way. You would argue Lamar Jackson still, this version is going to score him. So I have a harder time doing that. So I'm looking for guys that have passing upside, like a Sam Darnold, something like those are guys I still would play over Lamar Jackson.
I'm interested that you seem to have Trevor Lawrence ahead of Tyrod, which understandably he's been scoring fantasy points, but the way he's been scoring fantasy points just seems very, I don't know, it seems unsustainable to me. Like what's been happening with Trevor Lawrence and some of his stuff.
That's a good game environment though,
on the ground. Yeah, like it definitely could be a good game environment. I just don't know if I did not have Trevor Lawrence ahead of Tyrod Taylor. Like thinking about it now later in the week, I don't know. Like I don't trust Trevor Lawrence. That said,
Fair.
I will be playing him this week in a 2-quarterback league. Jackson dart out, so it is what it is, right? You live your dreams, and you'll play him. Yeah, like I don't think
Jets Dolphins it might have 110 plays running it.
That's the concern we have with Tyrod here. We need one of those. We need some Adonai Mitchell magic again to come out of that, and obviously we need Tyrod to get some rushing production. That's the thing about the Dolphins, and you highlighted it in the worksheet that like haven't really been talking about is just how like they're just limiting Tua. Like it's just they're running the ball, and Devin Achane is really good at it, and so might as well. Devin Achane, we talked about before the season. One of the reasons we were high on him was what if he gets the workload and the efficiency from his rookie year comes back, and we've seen that more recently. Not quite to that level, obviously. That was one of the most efficient seasons we've seen, but so they can.
And
just
that's what's hurt Waddle, because like Waddle has all these great peripherals like yards per out run, target share, air yards, all that stuff, but like they're just not throwing the ball. So we're not getting that marriage of Waddle's of what the efficiencies he's having with any type of volume, and it's kind of nuked him a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I'm pretty excited if you were like really searching for a tight end. I'm pretty excited about what we're going to see from Darren Waller the rest of the way, but it's the same issue. It's like if they're just not throwing enough, then how do we get there?
Yeah, that tight end you can just get by with a touchdown.
Sure.
Like
And their run defense, like I remember there was a Sunday where we saw their run defense like playing like it was like their second week in a row playing well, and we went, oh, okay, well their run defense is fixed. Like they're now fine and run. It's just interesting. Miami's an interesting team, a very very interesting team. All right, let's move on and talk about a different running game, and that is the Bears. And I will say my statement for you is the Bears are going to run successfully enough the rest of the way to support 2 fantasy viable running backs.
I don't know what viable is. I'll still say I disagree just because I think Monanga is still like in the Algier, Zach Charbonnet like
I agree.
realm.
Yeah.
But I do believe that this is a run game to absolutely stock. Like, last week you're just not going to have the double 100-yarders. Like that's also is very rare that it happens to that degree. But man, did they have Vic Fangio and the Eagles in hell all Friday night. And it makes sense that this run game actually is like the strongest part of the foundation of the Bears, because like when you look at where they invested their money into the veteran offensive linemen, right, in getting Joe Thuney and getting Dahlman, and that's where they were running behind on Friday night. DeAndre Swift is a veteran back, whether people have qualms with him or not. Monangai is a young player, but that's where like all their like investment into veteran talent on offense is. And it makes sense that the passing game's kind of volatile because like all their pieces in the passing game outside DJ Moore are like young players. So like it's why it's been like some growing pains, but you see flashes. And this is what Ben Johnson did in Detroit too. So like we have like a foundation to like believe in this and stock it based on the personnel they have, the talent they have, and the way like the offense wants to be run. It's been a really good boon for DeAndre Swift. It's helped Monangai at least be kind of flexy. Now you still need touchdowns from him most weeks because you're not going to get the 100 yards in the game. Swift plays a lot, so that's why I would keep him. So like it's an asterisk, the disagree, a hedge on my part, I guess, but I definitely believe in this running game.
I worry about, from Monangai specifically, I worry about just game script, like because we've seen Swift just be way more involved when they get behind. That hasn't been as big of a problem recently. And I mean, they're going to be, you would assume, fine in a home game against the Browns, which they have one of those left. Obviously, that's a tough matchup, but you would think the game script's going to cooperate for them in that game. I don't know. Maybe we get Deshaun Watson back and he suddenly.
Oh, boy. Yeah. I had the splits in the worksheet. I still love that since the bye. And Swift has 63% of the offensive snaps, and this is removing the game he missed, the Bengals game. 63% of the offensive snaps and 76% of the backfield touches when Chicago's trailed since their bye.
Yeah, so like that's a problem since they have the Packers 2 more times and the 49ers. And the 49ers, like it's not like a matchup you're scared of, but could they just shred them on offense with the Bears, let's say hot and cold pass defense, and then does that get Monangai out of it? And so that's really, I think, the concern moving forward you would have with Monangai is in those 2 Packers games and in that 49ers matchup, do we get him just game scripted out? Of course, that would require, and this is a good time to talk about this game, that would require the Packers to go out and try to score points and let Jordan Love cook and go. Like, so that would require that early in the game. Is that what we're going to get?
Probably not.
I don't know. Like, probably not, right? Please, more Jordan Love. Can we just please get more Jordan Love? We also have an interesting situation there at receiver with it seems like Matthew Golden will be back. We'll see what happens with Jaden Reed. Obviously, Dontavian Wicks had the big game in the Thanksgiving window that everybody watched. So I assume people are going to be interested in Dontavian Wicks. And obviously, this is a Dontavian Wicks fan zone over on this side of the screen. But we just have such a long history of him. If he's on the field, he's getting targets. That's what he does. But is he going to be on the field if Golden's back, especially if Reed's back? Probably not, right?
Yeah, well, listen, week 13, Wicks and Adonai Mitchell hitting. It was a vindication for us at the.
We really had a great week from that perspective only. But there you go. But yeah, like I think there's going to be a lot of disappointment in this passing game, even though it is a good matchup, like on paper. Like, do we expect the Packers to go and do that? I don't know.
Probably not with Matt LaFleur.
Yeah, all right. I'm not going to force you to talk about the Packers. All right. We'll move on to our last one here. I've said this about Trevor Lawrence, but now we're going to do it about Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett will just keep getting away with this. Agree or disagree?
No, I disagree because it's like I've been doing this for years, right? And whether people like Bortles or someone else, like there's a difference between playing in shootouts and scoring fantasy points in garbage time. And when Jacoby Brissett first took over as the starter, we had competitive games that the Cardinals were in, back and forth games. And that's completely gone out the window. And now, like, he's just getting there based on pure volume. And he's also just backdooring. Like, he's not even been, like, great. He's just backdooring, like, QB1 stuff. I do think these next 2 games, and he's had great matchups, too, by the way.
Yeah.
And he's just backdooring. Now, I think these next 2 weeks against potentially the Rams and Texans, like, we could see this kind of catch up. But the pass volumes is what it is. He's got 40 or more pass attempts in every game but one, leads the NFL in dropbacks. You can always get value to kind of be like that high end QB2. But I do think like the people chasing him as like a locked in QB1 have like kind of been missing. So you always see his stats like he's been a QB1 in every start, and like that is true. But he's just been like a floor based QB1. He doesn't even have a first half passing touchdown since week 9. Like it's absolutely crazy. He scored 4.5 fantasy points per game the past month in the first half of games, which is like it's a sandwich between Geno Smith and Cam Ward. Like that's the level of like operation. And then like he's just coming back and getting these points in the second half. Eventually, you're not gonna be able to get out of one of these holes, like because they've just been consistently in holes. And like this is a team that looks like they've kind of punted on like the end of the season too. Like, I don't know what's going on internally. Jonathan Gannon seems like he's over it. Like when you see some of the pressers for him. Drew Petzing had a question this week and it looked like he was just like, you know what, man, it's Christmas is coming. Like, I don't know. So yeah, I do think that the shoe is going to drop here. And maybe these are the two matchups, Rams and Texans. I will say there's probably a chance he could still get to like a good yardage total here. Just because we've seen guys like Mac Jones get to 300 yards against the Rams too in high scoring games. So, but like my years of doing this, the way he's accruing his points, like there's a shelf life on this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And like, I mean, the Rams is different. We saw Bryce Young get there last week, right? So like the Rams are a little bit different, but the Texans, once we get there, that's a different beast.
Yeah.
That's a different beast entirely. So we'll see, we'll see where it goes. I think it's interesting because like all the points count. I want that to be clear.
They all
the points count. But your question is, can he continue to live like that? We saw Justin Fields live like that for a few weeks early in the season, in which he would just like, they would be losing in the fourth quarter and he would rack up some points, some passing yards and stuff like that. I'm not comparing Jacoby Brissett to Justin Fields. I think he's a better quarterback than Justin Fields, but like we saw that happen and then it just stopped. Right. And so we could see something similar happen.
And I did an article when I first started at Roto World that kind of talked about how garbage time is like generally a myth. Like, because if you're playing bad and like it's you typically just don't turn it on because teams don't give up a lot of production at the end of the games too, even when they want to let you just have like short completions. So it's like I keep like just knowing like, hey, that like typically this stuff kind of expires at a certain point. And the reason we liked Jacoby Brissett when he took over is that it allowed like the Cardinals to play under center and they started playing more play action, like all the things that are like good in like the current meta, right? And because they've been so bad, like that's gone all the way out the window. Like they're just in like pure like drop back shotgun mode, like the whole second half of these games.
It doesn't seem like we're getting Trey Benson back now either. So like there's no real hope for the running game, at least, based on what we saw Wednesday. Again, we record this on Thursday morning. So we'll see. But the trend for Trey Benson is not ideal if you're hoping that he's going to be coming back.
And I'm curious about that game in general too, because like Stafford, who's obviously still playing really well, like Gannon's given him problems before too, and like that's a structure of defense that is set up to like kind of combat the stuff that that Stafford thrives on, the under center play action passing. Like they just going to play a lot of quarters, a lot of shell coverage. They want to come up and tackle. They got Will Johnson back and were like more respectable on defense last week. So I'm very curious about just that game in general, if it ends up just being kind of a meandering game. But I mean, I'm not like sitting Stafford, especially in this climate that we kind of have hinted on, especially with them playing so well. But I'm very curious of that game though, to see how it plays out.
I actually kind of like Blake Corum for that reason. Kyron's obviously nursing an injury. We would expect them to be leading. That's a situation that favors Corum to get more touches, especially in the first half. He's been getting touches. And then just if they're leading, he's getting touches. So like I could be convinced to like Blake Corum this week as a result of kind of what we expect that game to be. All right, let's get on and talk about a few of the games. We have it hit on here. Before we do that, I do want to mention, remember, you can get a preview of every single game this week, every single fantasy relevant player and every single game from Rich Hribar. We call them the worksheets. They're available to our fantasy football subscribers, and you can get that fantasy football package for just this week for $1 using promo code Week 14. Make sure you head over to sharp.football and check that out. And then also make sure you subscribe on YouTube, your podcast player of choice. We appreciate the support. And there's a lot of content left here in the year. We'll have our Friday show with Rich and Ryan and Joe joining Warren, talking about picks and college and all that stuff. So make sure you check all of that out. All right, let's get to the games. I want to get started because this game is really good and it's a really important game. It's one of the best real football games. It's not interesting, I don't think, really from a fantasy perspective, but I still wanted to just talk about it here at the top, and that's the Texans at the Chiefs. Chiefs -3.5. The total is 42. Did get Woody Marks. Woody Marks had an ankle injury, came back into the game and played, but we did get him as a DNP on Wednesday. So it is something to watch, although I would assume that he's going to play. And I guess the question is kind of on the Chiefs side against this defense, like, do we feel confident in any Kansas City Chief as a fantasy play this week? Because for me, the answer is probably Rashee Rice. And then that's about the end of the list.
Yeah, probably Rashee Rice, and like you're still probably playing Kelsey, like in your, and
you're still probably playing Mahomes, just because again we keep talking about the quarterback situation.
Yeah, I mean, Mahomes is a dicey one, right? Because like we actually have like a recent proof of him facing two good defenses and not being that good for fantasy.
Yeah,
like he against the Broncos and against the Bills, he was not good. Last week was his first week higher than QB10 since week 7. The Chiefs have their lowest implied total of the season at home this week, which makes sense because the Texans, they've only allowed over 20 points twice this season. They haven't allowed a QB1 this season. And then you just like talk about the linemen that they're just be missing. We know Josh Simmons isn't going to play. Jawan Taylor might not play, and we don't know if Trey Smith's going to be back against literally, the team has the second best pass rush, and they get pass rushes. They get an awesome pass rush without blitzing.
Yeah. So
like in Mahomes, we've seen this story, right? Like the Bucs Super Bowl, like if you can get home at 4 against Mahomes, still like he's still mortal. And he's been bad under pressure this year, but it's in a weird way. It's really weird because like typically quarterbacks, when they get pressured, like they're more skittish and they want to throw the ball. Mahomes is the opposite. Like he's like getting pressured and like extending plays and like trying to throw downfield. Like his when he gets pressured, he has the second highest average depth of target in the NFL. He goes from 6.6 air yards per pass attempt when kept clean, which makes sense because they throw a lot of quick hitting stuff too, to 11 air yards per attempt when he's pressured, the second highest in the NFL. Like I said, he's trying to big game hunt and extend these plays. And that's kind of been what I think has been more maddening about this Chiefs team in previous years. We want that marriage, right? Like we were always mad after the Tyreek Hill trade that they just didn't have that vertical element. And then this whole offseason, they told us like hell or high water, we're going to throw deep. And they've been trying to just force that this year, but they haven't been good at it. And like, it's kind of hurt their consistency and like a lot of their offensive efficiency at moments. Like the Bills game really stands out because the Bills played a game plan that was like, please throw short against us. And they were like, no, we're not going to do that. So I'm very curious to see how they handle that pressure. But yeah, you're probably sticking with him because, like I said, are you going to bench Mahomes for Tyrod Taylor? Like, probably not. But it is a spot objectively on paper. Like, you just don't feel bullish about a ceiling. And these teams played twice last year in Kansas City, and he wasn't good in either game as a passer. He got over one game through rushing, which I guess you could hope for as an out here because he's been running more again this year. But he also wasn't as good as a fantasy player in either of those games.
Yeah, but like to your point, I pulled up your rankings because it's just we keep talking about it, so I want to bring it up. He's the QB6 in your rankings this week because who are you putting ahead of him? You have Trevor Lawrence one spot behind him. I mean, like maybe you would do that, and then it's like Goff, Brissett. We've already talked about the concerns with Brissett, Sam Darnold. You have just concerns always about volume, because I think Kirk Cousins is going to have some issues. I would say this week against Seattle. Daniel Jones, has a broken leg. Jordan Love, we've talked about. Does he, are they going to push it enough? And then like Lamar, like you have Lamar at QB 13. I can't even really complain that much about it. Like you look at all of these and you go, I just, okay. Like maybe Bo Nix, like maybe that's somebody you could also have if you drafted 2 quarterbacks, although he went high. So probably not. Like, yeah. What are you doing? Who are you putting ahead of Mahomes? That's the question.
Yeah, it's real. And he's another one of these guys too. Like you're damned if you don't, right? Like if he plays a bad game, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, he was missing 3 linemen against the Texans. I saw that coming. And if he has a good game, you're like, yeah, he's Patrick Mahomes. Like if you bench him, it's like it's really a tough spot for gamers this week with these quarterbacks. I would say Jalen Hurts too. Like I mean, Jalen Hurts, obviously you have the tush push stuff that like none of these other guys have, because Jalen Hurts could be certifiably bad and get like 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like that's wild. But like it's a terrible spot for Jalen Hurts too.
Yeah, it's just bad all around. It's not ideal. I do want to mention Rashee Rice because this is like obviously he's been so good since he's been off suspension from a fantasy perspective. And we had one of these situations, was it 2 weeks ago, where we were like, okay, this isn't a great spot overall, but he plays enough in the slot and he's going to get targets, shorter targets, the Broncos game. Yeah. And he's going to get shorter targets and everything. And it worked out. And I think it's probably going to work out for him here. But again, you also have to have lower expectations just in general, but just playing away from the outside in Houston and playing in the slot does give him an advantage. Getting those quick hits, those are harder to take away. Everything about that makes you think, all right, Rashee Rice is probably going to get there. A lot of the passing game will probably run through Rashee Rice as it normally does, but maybe even more so this week. So I do think that's the one where you go, especially if the offensive line has 3 people missing, all that kind of makes sense for him. And I guess could make sense for Kelsey a little bit. On the other side, there's not really a ton of interesting to talk about with Houston, especially since we don't know about Woody Marks. And even if we do, like it hasn't really been happening for him despite the workload. I am interested though in Jaden Higgins because we just continue. Why aren't they playing him more? Like we just need him to run more routes, because if he was running more routes, we'd feel a lot more confident in Higgins. And he's getting targeted when he runs routes, but like they continue to play Hutchinson and Kirk and like just play Higgins. Like what are we doing? Get his route rate up to 85, 90%. And then I think we'd be very confident in him as a fantasy player at this point.
That's all that's missing. That's all that's missing is like the real locked in playing time. It's kind of what makes him still like wide receiver 4 flexy type of guy, is that he's still only like 2/3 of the dropbacks. But second round pick, he's starting to get more put on his plate. We would hope by the time, if they make the playoffs, that he would just be a full-time player for them at this point. But Christian Kirk's been chat-a-rump. Like he didn't even have a catch last week when his route participation's completely fallen off. Like you said, Hutchinson is still out there getting his exercise, kind of a pain. We've got a couple of these guys still that like we've seen a rookie bump for them, but they just haven't quite gotten over the hurdle. Like Colston Loveland's another one that is performing, but like it's still just like you can't trust them yet because they're not playing full time. But yeah, Higgins has come on really nice. We had his player prop last week that hit, and it's not a great matchup for him, but you might be missing some guys on bye this week where you just kind of keep having to plug him in. And I like him more. I had this question in the chat last week, which was basically Burden versus Higgins rest of the season. And I chose Higgins because of the touchdown equity. I said, you got 2 guys, basically the route participation similar. I think there's less in front of Higgins. And then Higgins also has scored touchdowns and gotten the ball thrown to him in the end zone where Burden still hasn't. So I was on the Higgins side. Do you disagree with that?
No, I'm with you on that. And I think he has just less competition for targets. Like Dalton Schultz isn't as good as Colston Loveland, although Colston Loveland hasn't been. Again, that's another one you mentioned, and we just play Burden and Loveland. Like, what are we doing? Like, just play those guys. But yeah, so like I would say in the Higgins side of that, what I'll say is I made a horrible mistake mid-season in one of my leagues in which I had both Noel and Higgins. And I was like, well, with Collins coming back, is that like a roadblock to Higgins? They're going to keep playing Hutch. And I kept Noel, and it turns out that was a mistake. So good job, Summerlin. I'm happy that you don't have Higgins here for what we hope is an expanded playoff.
But yeah, like Xavier Worthy at this point, like I don't know who's trotting him out there here.
Yeah, we're like, we mentioned this actually, talking about a receiver in the next game who also didn't practice on Wednesday, Josh Downs. We'll talk about that in a second. But like, what do you say at this point about some of these guys like Worthy? It is what it is. Like he got a catch and run last week and it was fine, but it wasn't good. Like, what do you say about these guys? What do you say about Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco? Like, I don't know what you say about like Pacheco. Will he get more work this week? I probably, he's another week removed from, and got a little longer layoff as well because of Thanksgiving. So will he get more work? Probably. Do you care? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of like, what do you say about these guys at this point? It is what it is. But anyway, Let's get to that game. Let's get to the Colts and Jaguars. Colts -1.5, 47.5 point total. Like you said, this is setting up to be a good game environment. We hope. We obviously need to see what Daniel Jones looks like playing on that leg. Like, we've got lots of questions, but we hope this could be a better game environment. I mentioned Josh Downs was a DNP on Wednesday. Parker Washington also DNP on Wednesday. I'm more worried about Washington. I kind of don't think Washington's going to play this week. But let's keep an eye on those. Again, we record on Thursday morning. We don't know the full injury kind of layout there. We talked a little bit about Trevor Lawrence, but Daniel Jones is, I think, the interesting part here with that leg injury. Obviously, it seems like he's had it for a while. It came out last week what he's dealing with. He certainly is not moving it the same way. You're not going to get the rushing production out of him. And so I guess the question is, can we get enough in this matchup, which is actually a pretty good matchup, Cam Ward, be damned, but this is actually still a pretty good matchup. Can we get enough passing efficiency out of him, and I guess enough passing volume out of him to still feel comfortable with him as a starting level fantasy quarterback?
I believe so. I think because even through this injury, the floor has still been there. He still he isn't like pumpkined. Like, we haven't seen Daniel Jones like revert to being like an unusable player. He's like living in like that, 14 to 17 point fantasy range. It's still been a solid floor. I do believe that this particular matchup too offers some efficiency outlets too. Well, the big thing too that I think go back to last week is that the Colts just ran their offense as is, outside of like the removal of the RPO stuff. Like, he wasn't like pushed to just playing in shotgun, right? Like, and doing all these other things like we've seen like Aaron Rodgers have. Like, the offense changed because of Aaron Rodgers' injury. Justin Herbert, if he plays on Monday, the offense is going to change. It changed when he came back into the game on Sunday. But the Colts still just ran like their base offense. Like, they still ran all the pre-snap motion stuff, all the play action stuff. And that's the key for this matchup. Is that's where the Jaguars have been vulnerable. On non-play action passes, they're 8th in completion rate, 3rd in yards per pass attempt. They go to 14th in yards per pass attempt against the play action, 16th in completion rate. So I do think there's some efficiency outlets for here too. They're a little bit of a pass funnel too. No running backs rush for more than 63 yards against them in a game this season. They face the 3rd highest. Actually, both of these teams are a little bit of a pass funnel, which makes, like I said, the game environment kind of potentially fun here. And then like ISO, going back, my one stat that I keep going back to is saying like I'm going to have Daniel Jones like my tournament pool this week too, especially like doubles, because I think a lot of the pass catchers are in spots here too, is that the Jacksonville Jaguars allowed 2025 Geno Smith to throw 4 passing touchdowns against them. And that's just something I'm going to still hold into regard for when teams play the Jaguars and say like, hey, and a really efficient quarterback can still get over on the Jaguars passing game. So I'm still optimistic that you have a floor here to build from. He's still showing a high floor, and then the matchup and game where it could provide upside. So I'm a little more on the bullish side still of Daniel Jones, even though we're not going to have you can't count on any rushing at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, we got in trouble with that idea with the Jaguars defense last week with Cam Ward, but obviously we're talking about a much different level at this point with the 2025 version of Daniel Jones. We've also seen them, like you said, we got to be honest, we saw them shut down the Chargers as well, but those have been real, like that's not what we've seen from the Jaguars defense overall, I would say. So it's just really just seem like outliers as we're looking at this. You mentioned the rushing production that the Jaguars have allowed. Jonathan Taylor's been, way more human as of late, although like it wasn't like he had a bad game last week.
120 yards last week.
Yeah, it's just he's been more human than
the bar was set real high.
Yeah, than he was. He's not the overall RB1 every single week like he was through the first 6 weeks of the season. So that's kind of where the bar was set. So he's looked a little more human. This isn't a great matchup for him, but like we're going to get more. We've been getting more receiving work out of him. Like you're obviously not sitting him. This is just more a question of how are you playing this in DFS?
Right. Yeah, like DFS or player prop stuff would be it. And there are a number of players like that we always write up in these matchups. But I mean, the good defenses that he's faced is where he has looked more human outside of the Denver game. Denver was the one team he kind of got over on. But, Steelers, Chiefs, Texans the past month, like those are spots where we knew were tough going in. And those were kind of his worst games. And he's got another one of those this week against the Jaguars. They do give up some passing production to running backs, which is nice because we've seen him. He's going to blow past his career marks in receiving. He already has like his best receiving season since like 2021, and he's going to get past there. He's actually in 5 catches short of his career high. So he's going to get there. But yeah, but because he was so good early in the season, it's weird to like the way DFS operates is they will jam you up in terms of pricing if like you're hot or people play you. But if you're doing bad, like it takes a while for your price to come down. So like because Jonathan Taylor ran so hot and so optimal at the beginning of the season, his price went so lofty that when he's in these spots like this, you're like, well, damn, he's still like 9.3 and like, 8.7, and you're like, oh, that's it's a tough price to pay when you have kind of like a questionable spot, because you do need at that price point him to have close to 30 fantasy points, and it's just harder to objectively say like this is a 30-point fantasy game for him.
On the Jaguars backfield, first of all, I have to apologize. I don't remember who it was, but somebody asked me if I would play Etienne last week over Josh Jacobs, and I said yes, that I would, and that did not work out because we had Bashal Tutin come back in, get more work than he had gotten the week before. Even it looked like Etienne was running away from it. We saw Tutin come in and get the goal line work. Obviously, got the touchdown. It wasn't like he was hyper effective. Neither back was super effective in a spot that I think we expected them to have. A pretty good games overall, and it just didn't work out for them. And now we're back to this split, and you have to question, like, Tutin is not getting enough reliable work, I would say, to really be somebody that you're interested in putting into your lineups. And then with Etienne, if he's not going to get the goal line work, like, what do you have from him as well? So it's just it's kind of a lackluster situation overall.
Yeah, real tough, because we saw 3 weeks ago it be more like a 50-50 split, and like where they were interchangeable on drives, and then Tutin had like the ankle injury. We come back the following week and he plays but doesn't really have a high workload. Then you come back at this game, and they just started out with Etienne and he just ran cold. I think initially they just got away from him because he wasn't effective at all early in the game. They're like, well, this isn't working, let's adjust. Liam Cohen's done that a few times, and it's worked out because he's a coach that actually understands things. But the coaching staff has like really talked about Tutin like short yardage all season, because we've seen this, like he was involved, like he's pilfered a few red zone touches here and there throughout the course of the year. And they've talked about just like him, like getting yards after contact, not losing runs. And that's why they like to use him in that area. So you do always have that in kind of the range of outcomes here, for even if Etienne's playing well, he could lose some goal line carries. Like I said, Tutin doesn't have enough workload to, I think, get into like what we talked about with like Monangai, the Charbonnet, Tyler Algier zone. But that's where he's like getting towards. If you can get it, he's very much just touchdown or bust. If you don't get a touchdown from him, what are you getting from him? But it makes Etienne a little less trustworthy when he was kind of getting back into our good graces and been more of like, oh, this guy is like, not only is like a volume-based RB2, like he might be like actually a volume-based RB1. And then last week the rug gets pulled on us. So very tough to trust into that high regard. But I think most gamers that have Etienne are probably still playing him in an RB2 flex spot anyways.
Yeah, what are your options? You're just you're gonna roll him out there. All right, one more game for us here. The Bengals at the Bills. Bills minus 5.5, 53.5 point total, a massive total in this game, which makes sense given kind of the Bills are at home. The Bengals defense. I don't think we're buying into some of the recent success they've had, especially with Trey Henderson still out. Dalton Kincaid limited on Wednesday, although I believe they added a knee injury to the list, which you never like to see.
You like when your guys are already not playing and they have a new injury?
Yeah, it's less than ideal, we would call it. T. Higgins limited as well on Wednesday. I would expect both players to play, but we are still like making assumptions about that as we go. I mean, this is obviously a great spot for Josh Allen. This is it's a big game. It's an important game for the Bills, right? We think that he's probably going to show up at home. But do we have any confidence, even if Dalton Kincaid's back, do we have any confidence in any of his pass catchers from a fantasy perspective?
I mean, obviously the outlook is great for Kincaid if he plays, and even if he's limited, you're okay because healthy Dalton Kincaid is limited.
Yeah,
he only plays 53% of the dropbacks anyway. So like, if he's
what does a limited Kincaid even look like? Like, is it?
I would assume it's just the same, right? Yeah. Like he just gets his alleviation is all in the rundown stuff that he wasn't playing. We've seen it again on Thanksgiving. Isaiah likely get there. It's all tight ends consistently against the Bengals. And then while they don't give up a lot of production to wide receivers in general, at least like they're pretty vulnerable in terms of efficiency through the slot. So like if you have Khalil Shakir, you're like, all right, like it's at least could be a spot where he could have some production. They're 29th in yards per target to slot receivers. So you can maybe push him back out there as like that floor. Go ahead.
But we need to see him like what we saw last week. And obviously it was game plan specific.
Yeah, they just played heavy.
And they played heavy. Excuse me. Could we see more of that though moving forward? Like I don't
Sure.
think so, because Shakir is their best receiver. Like, that's very obvious. He's their best receiver. You would like to see him on the field more, but you at least have to have some concern based on his route participation. And if they found something, if that's something they want to do moving forward, you at least have to have some concern about that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the Khalil Shakir life, right? Like, this is why, I mean, most people that listen to this and follow us like didn't end up with him because he's just not an archetype of player I generally push gamers towards, because he doesn't play in 1 to 2. Like, again, that's all the stuff that you talk about. It's just like, but if you do have Shakir, I would say like this game environment and the potential matchup is probably a spot like with 4 teams on bye still. You're probably like, you know what? I'm going to put him in wide receiver 3 and just see what happens. Maybe we get the game environment to pop off. But if this is just a James Cook running down the Bengals' throat, which very much could happen, then you're not going to get that run out. Absolutely. But it is like, the Josh Allen, James Cook special here on paper. One of the good quarterbacks that we can say is in a certifiably good spot.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're on Josh Allen this week for sure. I am going to keep watching. Like, I don't know what he has. Like, he's still young, and obviously he's had success before, and he keeps playing more and more and more, even with Keon Coleman back in the lineup. I'm going to keep paying attention to Gabe Davis. We're going to be interested in Gabe Davis. I'm going to keep paying attention is all I'm saying, Rich. I'll keep paying attention.
We're at that point of the season where the plane starts to get built out of Josh Allen. Like, we're in that point where
just run.
You start to see a lot of Josh Allen carrying these games that matter.
Yeah. On the other side of it, obviously we got Joe Burrow back. Liked what we saw from him. It wasn't like, from an efficiency perspective, it still wasn't ideal, but that Ravens defense is tough. Like, we know that Ravens defense is tough.
Yeah, and I saw some people kind of like dunking on the Ravens defense, like they were frauds. And I was like, was that the takeaway here? Like, the Bengals literally had 4 turnovers. They couldn't score a touchdown on any of them. The Ravens stopped them, like kept them out of the end zone in bad spots. The Bengals also ran 80 plays in that game. Like, their yards per play were junk. It's just like the Ravens defense was put in like an unwinnable spot and held on as long as they could. I think if your takeaway was the Ravens defense were frauds, I mean, you did not that was not the case at all.
You might have been in a turkey nap would be what we'd say about that. But I mean, if T. Higgins comes back, we have a long history of Joe Burrow being better with T. Higgins on the field, at least going back to last season. So all of that is interesting for the passing game. But I mean, you're playing Joe Burrow and you're playing T. Higgins and you're playing Jamar Chase.
Right.
That's not as interesting to me. I am very interested in Chase Brown because, again, you are playing Chase Brown and he's been so much better as of late. But we saw Samaje Perine come back, immediately get back into that role where he's taking a large share of the touches and the carries. And Chase Brown just got there because, he got a lot more catches than I expected with Perine back. And he's been good. Like, that's ultimately the long and short of it. He's been good. But I do wonder, like, if we continue to get Perine getting 40% of the running back snaps, are we going to hit a wall here with Chase Brown? It's something to watch, and it's something that I'll be interested in as we go forward.
Yeah, and he might be able to still on just like a depressed workload, have enough efficiency here to be like RB2 upside. But then you've got, like the Ravens on deck again, where they probably won't run 80 offensive plays, I'm assuming again. Then you've got the Dolphins. Then he does close with that great Cardinals game too. But that's where the play volume showed up, was in Chase Brown's box score, right? Because you look at the box score and you're like, oh, he got the 20 touches again, went over 100 yards. And like, yeah, they ran 80 plays. He only handled 57.9% of the backfield touches. The 3 weeks prior, when Perine was out, 91%, 89%, 91%. His pass participation dropped significantly. He was at 55% of dropbacks, which is still a pretty solid rate for running back, mind you, I say it. But he was at 86%, 83%, 76%. It just adds a layer of volatility when this team runs like 60 plays, like a normal team, 60 to 65 plays. So I think that I still had a hard time like vaulting him to like, this is an RB1. I still think he's very much like a more of like an upside RB2. I think the efficiency could still be here in this game. Since week 7, he's second in the NFL in explosive run rate behind Devon Achane. And we're facing a team that is 31st in explosive run rate allowed. I assume the Bills are going to be in a lot of nickel defense in this game as well. So you can still have some efficiency and some run out, but I would say that this could be a game where he doesn't get the 20 touches though. Like, you have like a 14 to 16 touch Chase Brown game. And it's why, spoiler alert, when I do that on the player prop show, I have a Chase Brown prop and it's related to efficiency and not value.
Yeah. I think that this week it's going to be fine because it's the Bills and like we're just playing you play running backs against the Bills, although apparently not Jalen Warren, unfortunately. But you got the end zone, we're fine. But you play running backs. We play running backs against the Bills, and so we're there. But it's something to keep an eye on if we're talking about the Bengals as we move forward. All right.
Yeah, and I really kicked myself for not adjusting the Steelers guys last week because they told us that. And it's something probably we should have known. They told us, but it was something we should have known without them telling us, that they just weren't going to play under center with Rodgers' injury. And that was something that was like a big red flag in terms of being able to have an efficient running game for them, because you remove that under center element from that offense, and it's a problem for that run game.
Yeah, they can't, their numbers out of shotgun, like they're under 4 yards per carry or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Running back carries, and it's Warren and Gainwell that don't do well in that situation. So that's also something to know for a game we're not talking about with the Steelers and the Ravens. I guess we talked about Lamar. I couldn't bring myself to talk about Steelers Ravens. I couldn't get myself there. It's a big game. It's a very important game. I will obviously be watching, but yeah, it's not as exciting from a fantasy.
Rodgers, man, on Sunday, like he was in full Murtaugh mode. Like the second he had that strip sack, like his beard got like 3 degrees lighter. Like it was like he was just like, it was like, get me out of here, man. Like he just said that. Like,
the nose cut was wild. It was like, I was like, yeah, man, we're back.
There was a lot of like deep thinking aside of like what am I doing right now?
All right, let's finish up here with what we always finish up with, and that is uncut gems. These are players who are available or they're on benches in deeper leagues, and we think they can outpace expectations this week and put up perhaps a starting level score. Who do you got this week, Rich?
Yeah, I'm going to take a Summerlin guy here, and I don't know if you were going to take him, but whatever. And I'll say Chris Rodriguez.
He was on the list. He was on the list for sure.
Yeah, especially, he's definitely like RB2 worthy, I think. Obviously, you do need a touchdown with a guy like him, but this is a game where we probably expect to be a tighter game environment. Washington not to be significantly trailing or having to go to like the jailbreak game script that they had to a week ago. The Vikings are a good run defense, but they face a ton of running back runs because they're not a good offense and they don't win a lot of games. So they face 27.4 backfield runs per game. That is the most in the NFL. So I think we could see Chris Rodriguez stack up a healthy workload. He's probably not going to catch a pass for you, unfortunately. But when you start to get to guys at the RB2 range, like we talked about, like Jalen Warren, what are you going to do with whatever Cardinals running back, Kyle Monangai, Woody Marks, Kareem Hunt, either Chargers running back? He fits in that bucket of guys, and I think he is objectively more appealing than any of those guys as well in this game environment that should be a lot tighter. And one of the things too that stood out to me for Washington, because they've had a dreadful year, is like we forget like this team was in the NFC Championship game and had a good offense last year. Like when they have all their guys back, it's still like is capable. Like this team's capable of still scoring and moving the football. So I think you can get some scoring opportunities. He obviously had the touchdown against the good defense last week as well. So yeah, I think Chris Rodriguez is in play this week, especially if you had Christian McCaffrey and you're not able to play him this week. You're not going to get Christian McCaffrey like production, but you need a body.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously in on Rodriguez this week for all the reasons you mentioned. And then I think the important thing you mentioned there, we did see a lot of McNichols last week, but that was in a different kind of game script. And I wonder, like, I'm much more interested in what we saw of the split between Rodriguez and Krosky Merritt, which was very heavily tilted toward Rodriguez, because I think that we're going to see a lot more of that. I think we're going to see 15 carries for Rodriguez in this game, unless Jay McCarthy comes back from concussion and suddenly, a much better player. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I would expect we're going to see a lot of carries here from Rodriguez. And like you said, even though the matchup's not good, you get a touchdown, you get 70 yards. Like you can certainly get there with him. And what we've seen recently makes me very interested in the week 15 matchup for Rodriguez, which is, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the New York Giants.
And
if that's happening, happening, and we continue to see the workload split we're seeing between Rodriguez and Krosky Merritt, then he's going to be just like a legitimate starter in that matchup and if we get there. So just something to keep in mind as we move forward. Or if you're a team that's already in the playoffs and you're looking for a waiver ad, you don't even necessarily need him this week, something to keep in mind. Rodriguez was on my list. I almost pivoted to him because I'm so scared of the name I'm about to say, but I will go ahead and say the name Tyler Shuck. It is not a great week for quarterbacks, right? We've talked about that a lot. And I also want to say if Chris Olave ends up sitting because he was a DNP on Wednesday, I will not be interested in Shuck. But here is my very weak argument for Tyler Shuck for this week if you're absolutely desperate. The Bucs are not a great matchup for him, but they've been a good matchup overall. They are a better pass defense with Jamel Dean. They blitz a lot. That's bad for Shuck. All of those are concerns, but I do think he could just get there similarly to what we've seen Jacoby Brissett do through volume, have a viable score. He's second in dropbacks among all quarterbacks over the last 2 games. We've also been getting running out of him over the last 2 games, 7 for 22, 6 for 18. That's not like super exciting, but you can get something of a floor. We saw him get some runs near the goal line as well in that kind of sample. So maybe he gets in for a touchdown. There are a little pass here for him to get to like 15 points. And maybe that's enough this week if you're really desperate at quarterback. I'm not excited about using him. I'm not making a strong case for him, but there is a path to 15 points for Tyler Shuck, and that might be viable enough this week. I don't know. I don't know. Have I sold it? Have I sold it weekly enough here for you, Rich?
Yeah, no, I think he's in that bucket of guys that, you get that floor-based kind of production and you just hope to maybe run kind of hot, or the week is just light like it was last week to kind of make him look better than he actually was in terms of fantasy production. And both of those are on the table this week.
Yeah, absolutely. If he gets a rushing touchdown, you're going to be feeling okay. Like if he gets a rushing touchdown, he'll probably have like a quarterback 12-ish kind of game. And you'll be like, all right, we survived. We survived this week. All right, that's it for us. Remember, you can head over to sharpfootballanalysis.com or sharp.football. You can take advantage of our great offer, $1 for all the fantasy content this week. That's promo code week14. Go and check that out. Get access to all of the game previews for this week from Rich, his DFS picks, as he's already kind of mentioned, some names you might find in there or not find in there as we get through that, his fantasy football rankings, all of that's available. Check that out. Make sure you subscribe wherever you find us, YouTube, podcast player of choice. We really do appreciate that. And Rich and I will be back next week to talk to you then.